everyone. We are here today to talk about tips for inversions and just inversions in general. Bradshaw is not going to demo for us, but you're going to start us off with
No,
what's that?
keep going.
Okay, I was going to say, I think you should start us off with just naming inversions because I think we should just start there. Like, what do we mean when we say inversions?
Anything that gets the hips above the heart. So handstand, but like we're thinking of handstand, forearm stand, and headstand.
Perfectly, perfectly stated. So we're going to do the ones that get us upside down in this way. We know that legs up the wall, down dog, dolphin, all
All
of
in.
those things. Forward folds, those are also inversions and they are great inversions, but we want to talk about things that I think are harder to teach in a group setting that we don't get to like break down enough.
Look at my friend Raphael's like, hey, come, let's get drinks after. I'm in bed.
I
Uh,
just want to say, so before we go deeper into this, by the way, we are on YouTube now, so you can re-watch this on YouTube. That's pretty exciting, and I usually edit out the beginning, so that's a side note. But okay, so like Bradshaw said, we're talking about things where the feet stack over the hips, stack over the shoulders, and that can be your headstand, forearm stand, and handstand.
I have so many thoughts on this topic.
Okay, let's hear them.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to realize come into a yoga setting. There's two different types of people in a yoga room when we're talking about inversions. We have people that have learned this skill or something similar to this skill in other modalities. For example, gymnasts, dancers, divers, climbers, uh, just so like people, maybe like even surfers, like who are really good with balance. Like there are people that have learned this skill prior to entering the yoga room. And then there's another portion of the population, which I think is a bigger part of the population, that hasn't had experience with getting upside down besides maybe a somersault when they were, 5 or whatever. So that is just something to recognize that it can be scary, right? And this idea that it's a little scary to get upside down is very relevant and normal. So if you see someone in the yoga room, you're like, oh my God, Jen just started practicing yoga and she can already do a handstand. It's like, well, she also did gymnastics until she was 16. So it's not surprising that Jen can do a handstand in her first yoga class. But Jen is also this is the exception to most people that enter the room. So just knowing that getting upside down is usually a multi-year practice.
Yeah, and you can totally learn it within the yoga setting, but it's harder to teach and to like grasp the mechanics of it in a group class. So
Yes.
I would recommend working with someone, taking a workshop, choosing a partner, all those things if you really do want to learn this, and then bring it into your practice.
It's definitely like a breakdown kind of thing. Like if you have no experience with getting upside down, like it's like a time where you're not like gonna do it during flow if you have no practice doing it. You're gonna do it at a workshop, you're gonna do it at a training, you're gonna do it where like they're really breaking that thing down.
Yeah, I think that we can go over some tips for each of these inversions that we just spoke about. And let's do the ones that are common through the three postures. So headstand, forearm stand, and handstand. Some of those beginner tips for each of these inversions, I would definitely recommend using the wall and have something to support you. If you are brand new, I think it can be a really good help. So for all three of those, you can do that. I think other common things that you'll need to learn to do is to like engage and squeeze glutes and legs together. And then to keep that alignment of heels over hips, over shoulders, over the head. Head right in between. So those are like the main commonalities I can say just right off the bat before even diving deeper. Are there any others that you recognize, Bradshaw, that I didn't point out?
Well, the shoulders are in flexion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Degree is of flexion, so that's a similarity. Um, you're at the highest risk of injury in a headstand. That's not to scare you. This is just kind of like factual. And the lowest risk of injury in a handstand. So the further your head moves away from the ground, the less prone you are to injury, which really makes sense. If you put a lot of pressure on your head and you don't know how to, cup your head in the correct way for a classical headstand, and it's not going to feel great. So what's another point I
Which
was going
is
to say?
Bradshaw, that's ironic though, because I think for a lot of people, the entry point is headstand because they find that less scary because they're closer to the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Most people, that's not my preferred way of teaching it.
I
My
agree with you. Yeah, I
Yeah, my preferred
prefer.
hands to
I
head,
pre-
head.
Your audio keeps getting shaky. I don't like when this happens. What is it? What were you saying?
I was saying that I have a preference of hands to forearms to head.
So, which is usually the opposite of how people are taught or introduced to them. And I completely agree with you. And that's because I have weak shoulders and a ton of mobility in them. So they're not as stable.
And you
So
also
you
have in your cervical spine, right?
Yeah, so I don't practice headstand anymore. When I do, I practice it headless, which is the variation where my head is like just like a piece of paper can
Hmm.
slither underneath it. So it might look like I'm on my head, but I have not put weight on my head in about 3 or 4 years. I've got some compression in a couple of vertebrae in my neck. I believe it's from years and years of headstand because I would like hold them for like 5 minutes plus. That's another thing
Also,
is
very are in Iyengar, you hold those poses for like 5 minutes.
yeah, and I think I was probably a little bit weak and just not like I would get so laxed in the headstand holding it for that long that I wasn't fully engaging and that's the other thing that we should mention another commonality is that pressing down motion so
Yeah,
that the usage of the shoulder blades to both elevate and protract. So you need to
called
push.
lateral rotation.
Yes, it is called lateral rotation. So like Bradshaw said, when your arms are overhead, this is flexion of the shoulders. And then you can't just like throw your arms up and dive into anything. You have to actually activate the muscles around the shoulders to keep the stability. So in
It's
all of
also
these poses,
you want gravity to work in your favor. You don't want to work against it. So it's like stacking muscle and bones and having the correct alignment, muscle engagement. There's, a lot of things at play. But before I forget, like I want to also mention, I think that like people get obsessed with strengthening the core for inversions. And I want to be like very, just like make sure everyone understands what I'm saying here. You're definitely using your core when you do inversions. I'm not saying you're not. But I think what should be talked about more is where you're looking, what you're doing with your hands, and what's happening in your shoulders, like you just said. That like this is not the action of a handstand. When you do a handstand, you let your shoulders lift up. So I like to really talk about that action, the action of the hands, and also where you're looking. I see people kick up to the wall sometimes. And I know, I've heard even Jason has said like, oh, you kick up and like just get them up. It doesn't matter where they're looking. I disagree. I think that you should know exactly where you're looking from the beginning, because I think that in an inversion, especially a handstand and forearm stand, obviously your headstand, your head's on the ground. It's really important to set that drishti and that focus point for mental and physical focus.
I agree with you. I can tell the difference in my handstand hold time when I'm really focused versus when I'm not, when I'm just kind of like blasé about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're practicing hold times, I might get a little bit relaxed. We could talk about that later when you have your handstand, you're comfortable with your handstand, and you're just practicing to increase that length of time. If I'm doing that, I get a little bit more relaxed about the gaze, but let's address holding
Yeah.
later. Um, Also, I know what you just said, and it makes sense. Hands, drishti, shoulders, but probably because I have super open hips, I cannot hold anything if I'm not squeezing the glutes and pressing my legs together. I will come right out of anything if I'm not just squeezing.
There's another thing to consider too, and that's just like what your body shape is. I'm not talking about you, whoever's practicing. I have really wide shoulders and a very small waist, narrow waist. If a lot of your strength and weight lies on the bottom half, that's a little harder to control, right? If someone's broader on the top and smaller in the waist, it's it's easier to control. It's not like you can't control it, but the inversion's going to feel differently. It's going to feel
Mhm.
different.
Okay, before we go further into some like specific tips more than we just did, can we lay out some good preparatory poses for these three? Like we talked about flexion, so shoulder flexion. So of course we do want, this is going to hinder or like is it make it or break it for certain inversions. I think it's more important to have good shoulder flexion in your headstand and forearm stand. So some of the prep poses like that, you can definitely do a dolphin. That would be a great way to start working the length in the front of the chest. Um,
For
what else?
handstand, I would do like on your back and do like Arden, like low boat, and then try to reach the arms behind you. As
Mm-hmm.
and I are similar in the fact that we both usually do the inversion on our backs or on our butts prior to the hands. Another thing that you could really think about is like in downward facing dog or in any pose where the hands are on the mat, talk about the dexterity of the hands. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about down through the fingertips and the fingertips lighting up. Talk about when you're looking to the top of the mat, how you're setting your gaze, and you're going to do a similar thing when you handstand, and just kind of like weaving those points into like all of your poses. I mean, even in like your warrior one, like in your warrior ones, like tell your students to like flip their palms and raise the roof. Like I teach that
Mm-hmm.
all, you know,
And
like
that's for handstand. But if you were doing a headstand, you could easily have them bring their hands
totally.
behind the head, and so you can recreate that shape too.
You can also do headstand like from Tadasana. So you stand up, you have them interlace their hands, and you have them press their forearms up. Another thing that I really like to say when because people get really weird with headstand with the position of their forearm. If the forearm is really narrow, it there's less base. It's harder to work with, and if it's really wide, it's also really wobbly. And
Yeah.
I'm not. So it's like I like the cue like take the hands behind the head. Can you see the periphery of your elbow? That's like where you want to be. It's like right in between too wide and too narrow.
Mm-hmm. I always like the imagery of drawing a triangle from,
Mm-hmm.
from the arms. So I like that imagery. But yeah, you can totally weave in the arm shapes and the actions of the arms throughout a flow. But I think some other like more basic postures is definitely your down dog, like Bradshaw said, and a plank and a chaturanga. Those are some really good foundational ones to help bring strength to your practice.
Another thing
Um,
that you
yeah.
can do again, I know we're doing more than handstand, but I teach handstands a lot, so I have a lot of thoughts on handstands. Is like from standing splits to just like I don't I want my students to be skillful in what they're doing, but I also want them to be playful and have agency over their bodies and exploration. So like in standing splits, I'm just like looking between your hands and like take a couple hops and like not over cue the pose. Just like take a couple hops and have them just get comfortable with both of their feet leaving the ground
Mm-hmm.
safely. And that's what you do in the middle of the room and like talk about that. Like you don't need to throw your legs in the air. Just like feel what it feels like to have both of your feet off the ground and your hands on the mat.
And the foot could lift 2 inches, doesn't matter. It's just about
Yeah.
getting weight in the hands and feeling the feet lift off the floor.
Something you'll notice with that though is that if people are tight in their hamstrings, they may have like a hard time getting their hands to the ground. So you can have your students step their foot back, like they're in between a down dog and like a really short truncated version of down dog. You can also have them bend their knee, or you can have them do both. If someone walks
Mm-hmm.
back and bends their knee, I promise they're going to be able to get their hands to the mat.
Mm-hmm. So I think these are all really good tips, and yoga teachers who are watching this maybe are already getting ideas of how to like sequence for inversions. But I think even beyond just that, Bradshaw and I love sequencing. We kind of work that into these types of conversations just because we love it. But I think if we just narrowed down some tips of getting upside down, and you started saying this before, Bradshaw, but I think it is about fear. I think embracing the fear and then also learning how to fall before you even learn the thing will be really helpful. So for example, we're just going to use handstand for example right now because I think this is one students love to want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
In handstand, I back in the day, I would see so many people just kick up and then like flop over. And if you don't have the flexibility to land in an Urdhva Dhanurasana, it's not going to feel good. It's going to be like a big splat. But then you would have those really bendy, flexy people who just no problem land in their Urdhva Dhanurasana, and they're like, okay, that didn't work out.
Yeah, but
I
that's not the normal person. That's not like
that's
the average.
not the normal. That's not the normal person. That was my experience. If I fell over, I was always in Urdhva Dhanurasana. Then I just come to standing and be like, let me try that again. But it wasn't until I actually took the route of cartwheeling out of handstands that I actually started to understand the mechanics of handstand and actually get a hold time more than 2 seconds.
I
So
want I want to add on to that too, which is like if this comes back to like the playfulness is like go to the beach, go somewhere where the grass is soft, and like and play with falling in a space where you feel safe falling. Like go to the gym, put some mats down, like and do like that. That's like kids don't learn, you know, handstands or like their first cartwheel usually from a teacher. They learn it from themselves, from exploring and playing, seeing it and trying it. So we need to be skillful in what we're doing, and I think to help get rid of the fear is have that element of playfulness and like playing in a space where it's not a hardwood floor and there's a little bit more cushion. I think will help people's confidence.
yeah, I will say though, I've seen some really brave people who have like no body awareness or idea of skill just throw their self around. So if you fall into that category, I recommend you
Good for
do
you.
use. Yeah, good for you. I'm envious of your lack of fear, but also be careful and use a partner. I think partnering, I wish Bradshaw and I were together so we could like demo this, but it's always really nice to stand out of the way so as someone's kicking up, they don't kick you, but to hold onto their hips and rest their glutes right on their shoulder. So it's nice and supportive, but it's also not the full support of the wall. Like
And
that one, yeah. What?
you typically wouldn't do that in a public class. You would do that more in a workshop setting, obviously, and then with the consent of your student. But
Of
that's like
course. I'm just saying for anyone who has a fun partner at home wanting to try this,
totally. I'm just saying,
yeah,
like, a teacher, I personally wouldn't do that. I don't think Gianna would in like a
no.
flow class. Just wouldn't do that. But it's
Yeah.
good for a workshop, and it's actually you can get a lot of people up. You can get most people up if you know how to assist handstand well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think learning how to fall it will help with your fear, and it'll also it teaches you body awareness. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's super important. Your awareness of how your body moves in space, or your proprioception, is super important in inversions. So, just to
Are you
re what's that?
are you think like are when you're handstanding, are you thinking about what you're doing? Like, are you like, okay, I'm doing like hands, like where am I looking? Like, is that like something that like runs through your brain or no?
When I'm really concentrating, but most of the time, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you and I are going to have different experiences. Bradshaw, just background, has been handstanding for way long, gymnast background. I learned as an adult, and it took me, and I'm still learning. Like some days I'm a lot better than others. And when I think more, also when I do a ton of core work beforehand, my hold time is better. My average hold time is only 10 seconds, but my max hold time is like around 30 to 40 seconds. So I can tell the difference when I can get up to that hold versus when I'm just not thinking and like throwing myself around. It takes a lot of concentration for me because I am really flexible. I'm more flexible than I am strong. Stop, Bradshaw. I'm more flexible than I am strong. So I have a disproportionate
Yeah.
distribution in my muscles in a certain way. So it takes more effort for me to engage.
I find that I'm flexible, strong, and good looking.
Of course you do.
And call the papers.
Okay, so I just wanted to recap learning to fall in handstand. I recommend cartwheeling out of that. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Well, also remember, like, too, that your hands are not cemented to the ground. So, like,
Yes.
but like, you're like automatically, unless you're drunk, when you're doing a handstand and you start falling to one side, your hand's going to move because your body's like reaction is to save your face, right?
Yeah,
So remember that your hand, like, that your hands are, they move when you fall.
totally. And I don't recommend that you practice drunk, just by the way. Um, okay, so learn how to fall. Second thing, just to reiterate tips, like Bradshaw said, kind of start with the hands moving upward. I just want to mention spider fingers because I personally cannot balance on my hands with flat palms. So spider fingers, for those of you who might not be sure, is when you kind of like, does this look weird?
Yes, you're just weird.
Andrea Ferretti joined. Hi,
I,
Andrea.
uh,
We're talking about handstand tips.
you ever heard of
Um,
it?
ever heard of it? Ever been upside down? Okay, so spider
Well,
fingers, Brett. What?
yeah. Well, I was also going to say, like, now it just reminded me because Andrea just popped on. Jason talks about like gripping onto, like, if you're doing Warrior One, like gripping onto a oversized beach ball. Like, how would your hand grab onto that? And I like that. I really like that visual, right? Of like gripping onto something that's, so it's like it really activates the fingers. I talk about it like light bulbs, right? As you grip down through the fingertips, they turn white, and it's like your fingertips are turning on like light bulbs because now your hands have become your feet.
Totally.
So you have to move, like if someone went to push you, you would press your toes down and pull you back. It's the same. They're your gas pedals.
Yeah, if you think about standing in tree pose, that little dance your foot does to keep you grounded in that one-legged balance, it's very similar. And we oftentimes don't even realize that we're doing it. It's like an unconscious movement of the hands to, just like Bradshaw said, act like your feet and keep you balanced to distribute that weight.
Is that,
Um,
I'm like, do you have a bird?
Yes, Rosie just brought me her toy. I tried to hide it on my glass table, but she found it. She was staring up, and I was like, let me just give it to
I would.
her. I'm just throwing it to her. Hopefully, she brings it into the other room and doesn't come back. Okay, so we're building up from hands. we're going in reverse, hands to the feet. Bradshaw talked about shoulders. uh, Lateral rotation, so pressing down through the hands. If you're in forearm stand or headstand, press down through the forearms because those will be the bigger surface area that's on the ground. And yeah, activating through the shoulders. Do you want to
And
add anything else?
yeah, I mean, it to not have to think so much when you're upside down. It's just like think, press the ground away. Like that's it. Just like press the ground away. And I think that when people start to press the ground away and work through their hands and know where they're looking, it can be a really kind of like light bulb aha moment, um, with like with getting upside down and feeling comfortable getting upside down.
Yeah, and last thing I want to say about that is my sister has been like a college gymnast and whatever, and she does a bunch of that. She would always tell me press your shoulders, your deltoids to your ears. So anytime I'm like extremely exaggerating that, I feel so strong and stable there. So
I think that that's a very important topic to come up, and I get off topic, but is the act. shoulders, and we're told so much in yoga to pull the shoulders from the ears. And I think what we're trying to say, it's not the worst thing. It's just that we're trying to like release that tension in the upper part of the neck. But when the arms are overhead, you want that action to lift up. So I know if you're hearing this and you're thinking, that's weird. I thought the shoulders moved down the back when my arms were overhead. They don't. They lift up. They lift up. And so I think that's kind of one of those yoga myths that we hear often, like the shoulders go down the back. And it's like, I think that like you kind of soften your upper traps, but your shoulder blades are not moving down. They're moving up. We can talk about that next week, but
Yeah, and just a side note with handstand, it would be really hard to soften your neck. So you're actually strengthening your neck in handstand specifically.
Yeah.
So
That's why I was neck.
You have Bradshaw's thinking of getting a neck tattoo. We already talked about this. It's going to happen, but
I'm not
because we're
thinking my appointment is set, so get ready for my neck to be tattooed and for my grandmother to roll over in her grave.
Okay, let's not go there.
No.
But yeah, just talking about necks, pretty soon that neck will be tatted. Another thing I want to talk about is just like hips over hands is so important. And I think in handstand, this you'll often see what they call banana back a lot, which is like this really big, like arching, just think of the shape of a banana, like a handstand like that. I think when you're new to handstanding, any way you can learn to distribute weight and balance is going to help you. But I think if you can stack more evenly, like we were saying, heels, hips, shoulders, hands, it'll set you up to like, it will just set you up for success, to be honest. You won't have to unlearn anything.
Totally.
Did you never learned that way, did you?
Shoulders, hips, heels, that kind
No,
of thing.
just like extreme banana back where like the belly points
I,
one way and the
that was
butt
never,
points.
no, I did. I mean, to be very like frank, and I'm not like tooting my own horn. This was one of those poses that came kind of naturally to me, and I don't think about. Like, there's not a lot of thought. That's why I kind of asked you that question prior. It's like it's not a posture that I think more in tree about what I'm doing and my body awareness and where my body is in space, because my ankles are much weaker than my wrists are, that I do in handstand.
That's interesting. It's
Yeah.
so funny how we can, all of us, just like approach things from different lenses and like not have the same experience at all.
I also think that when, we talk about these poses that people want to do, like a lot of people want to learn how to do handstand. I want to be able to sit still for 10 seconds, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So we all have different kind of entry points, like what we do, but it's just important to recognize that so many people, we glorify certain posers and not other poses.
It's true. That's a
Because,
different conversation.
okay, but it's like, don't let your like being a handstand be like the be all end all of your yoga.
I agree with that.
That's what I'm saying. It's fun to try it. It's fun to be challenged, but like, just don't get overwhelmed by it. I don't like to say, I feel bad when I feel like students get like frustrated or like, hyper focused on one, like being able to do one thing. And it's just like, just be so happy
Yeah,
to move and you can breathe and that you have the privilege to practice.
totally. And I've been teaching yoga a long time. I'm not a handstand master. I've been practicing yoga a long time. And I'm totally open about my journey with it. Like some days it's great, some days it's just not in my cards. I'm also not, I don't practice them as consistently as I used to. So I used to, anything done with consistency and focus, you will improve at. That's just the bottom line.
That's I wanted to add on to that, which is like, if you want to learn these skills or these postures, whatever you want to call them, asanas, you have to do that skill over and 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 over again. Especially if it's not something that you learned prior. It's like, do handstands for 20 minutes a day, every day. They're going to be easier. Doing it for 2 hours a workshop once a year, they're not going to be easy. It's like,
Exactly.
that's consistent. And I think we like live in this culture expecting to do things like learn everything really quickly. And like, it's not like, this is a a process.
Totally. The question, this is unrelated, but I'll have students, the most often asana that students ask me to learn is splits, and they'll be like, "Do you think I can get my splits in this by next month?" I'm like, "No." But similarly, nothing is overnight.
But they're also like getting fed that information line, like do splits in 30 days and like all, all that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Another conversation.
Another conversation. We could have a million tangents within this one conversation. But I'm like working my way up the body in the inversion. And then lastly, we talked about this, but the adduction of legs and the
Yeah, squeeze the legs.
engagement of glutes. I
You know
will.
what we talk about?
What?
The feet.
Yes. What do you do? A pointed toe or a flexed toe?
I do a point, a demi point. So I press
Oh,
through the ball on my foot.
you do a Barbie foot.
Yeah.
I
I feel
I
like I get the most out of my feet, like the lift, doing it like that.
can you show us your point?
My point?
Yeah, because people don't know what that means. Okay, so it's like
That's
it's
my bad,
like
that's my bad foot.
okay, so it's
Look at that.
you all. I have
Fun
to just preface this that
fact.
the, these feet pics are free. Um, but so basically, it's a plantar flex with the toes in the opposite flex. Would that be, are the toes an extension? So it's like a plantar flex with the toes pointing towards the face.
I can't believe I just put my feet online.
Oh my God, you need to do that other website that you keep talking about. I forgot what
Oh,
it's called. Okay, but one last thing I want to say is about leg variations, because I personally find different leg variations easier to stay inverted in. For example, like I can hold my um, middle split handstand a lot longer than straight legs. And I know this is not the norm, but I can hold.
it's your center of like you feel like your center of gravity is close to the ground.
And then the other leg variation that I think is often taught is a stag leg because they counterbalance each other. And a stag leg, for anyone who's not familiar with that term, is that one leg will come forward and bent and the other leg will be upwards and bent. These are my fingers. Does that finger demo work?
Do you know what? Can I say one more thing? One more thing about
You could say a million more things.
no, I have to pick up my laundry. Is when you handstand, the leg that's on the ground, instead of trying to throw that leg right up, a nice drill is to hug that knee into the chest. And I feel like people have more control over their pelvis that way. And like I always say, like, no spaghetti legs.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
pick up and like, woo! I
Yeah.
love my leg. These are my toes, right? You
I call them noodle legs, and anytime you go up loosey goosey, you're coming right down.
I know sometimes like you see people and you're like, whoa, we're gonna.
It's true. So Bradshaw made a really good point. Something that stuck in my mind when I took a workshop with Catherine Budig is that she always says with that kicking leg, so your like hopping leg, bring one leg up, and then your hopping leg, bring the knee right towards your nipple. So she'll teach it knee to nipple, knee to nipple, and once that connection was made, I was like, whoa, this makes so much sense, and my hang time was just like automatic.
I'm really
I think.
hang time, okay? Hang time.
Shut up. What should I say? Hold time or inverted time? Okay, so
And like surfers.
hang time, whatever. To review these tips, use your hands, they will become your feet. Use your shoulders, press the floor away, pull the belly in a tiny bit, squeeze the glutes, squeeze the legs, use a wall, use a partner, attend. Yeah, drishti down at the ground. For me, it's like down and a tiny bit forward between the hands. Use a wall, use a partner. A lot of these can go to the other inversions for shoulder stand and sorry, why am I saying shoulder stand? Forearm stand, excuse me, and headstand. One thing I want to say about shoulder stand that doesn't apply so much to handstand is you definitely need to adduct the arms a little bit so those elbows don't open up, and that will mess everything up. So just keep those elbows in. It really helps to use a strap around the biceps or to hold onto a block and kind of squeeze the block. So if you like to use props, that's a really good one there. And what else? Oh, once you are comfortable going upside down enough, and if you're doing handstands, I really recommend doing belly to the wall instead of back to the wall. So this will encourage you to not rely on the wall as much, and it puts more weight in your hands. Even though you're like, I'm upside down, how is it more weight? When you're actually leaning the body on the wall, it offsets what you feel in the hands versus being belly to the wall. So if you're comfortable upside down, do belly to the wall. It will help you. And if you are trying to increase your hold time, I'm not going to say hang time, I would recommend playing with 1 minute holds and trying to against a wall and trying to do it a couple times. Give yourself a break in between, but try to do it like 3 rounds. So that was really helpful for me.
I have one more thing to do. Breathe.
Okay.
Breathe when you're inverted. Like, don't forget you're breathing when you're upside down.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. That's for all my shoes.
You have too many shoes. I don't even know how many shoes you have, but I know it's too many. Okay, so those are all of our tips. Rosie is still giving me her toy to throw over and over. Of course, there are other tricks. We cannot possibly include everything here on an IG Live, but I think it's a really good conversation starter, and maybe something resonates and you take it to the studio.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining, talking about this stuff. If there's topics that you want us to discuss that are related to yoga, DM us and we'll put them on the live. We'll see you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye, everyone.